Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting our students to learn what we teach. And I am Rob Alvarez. I'm the founder of Professor Game and professor of gamification and games-based solutions at IE Business School, EFMD, EBS University, and many other places around the world. And if this content is for you, then please go ahead and subscribe to our email list for free at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, engagers, and welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have Mike with us today. But Mike, before we read your intro, we need to know if you are prepared to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Let's do this. We have Mike Washburn, is an educator, community builder, content creator from Barrie, Ontario, Canada, and he currently serves as the Director of Learning and Development for Logix Academy, which is a STEM, robotics, and learning experience design company based in Toronto, Ontario. And as a former computer science teacher, he created a custom-made curriculum using elements of game design and game-based learning, culminating in a year-long grade 8 project called Game Design Challenge, which asked students to design and create every aspect of their own video game. And since then, he has worked with leading edtech organizations to connect educators through community building and professional learning, enabling them to share their passions and knowledge. He was also the co-host of the hit education podcast On Education and hosted and produced the official Minecraft Education Edition podcast and the real-time 3D education podcast in collaboration with Epic Games. With almost 500,000 podcast downloads, he's a standout voice for technology in education, and he has written for EdSurge and has been a notable featured or keynote speaker at conferences across North America, such as ISTE and FETC. Mike, I don't know if we're missing anything from that intro that you want to make sure we get in.
No, you got it all. That's a lot of stuff. It's fun to hear it all said out loud.
Amazing. So, Mike, we are always curious to know what the lives of our guests are all about. So can you guide us through a day, a week, whatever you want to go for at this point? We want to feel what Mike Washburn feels nowadays.
Amazing. So thanks for having me. This is exciting. I love talking game-based learning and video games in education and gamification. And, so my day job as the Director of Learning and Development for Logix Academy, we are, as you said, a STEM, coding, robotics, and learning experience design company. And my role there entails a lot of things, but a lot of my day is working on the many projects that we're doing with various clients. We deal with government agencies, we deal with, nonprofits, for-profit companies. We deal with media organizations. We just finished a project with CBC, which is the Canadian national broadcaster. So working on and leading a number of those projects with our team of, learning experience designers, curriculum developers. When it comes to Minecraft worlds, we do a lot of Minecraft world building for different groups. And so managing and scoping out a lot of world building projects and then managing the build teams that we have between, 3 and 5 people generally working on a build at any given time. And we generally have 2 to 5 world building projects going on at any given time. So managing a lot of projects, a lot of meetings. To be fair, it all sounds fun, but mostly I sit in my office and have meetings most of the day. But I guess the other thing that is a very regular part of my work life is that I call myself the resident traveler for Logix Academy. So I'm on the road a lot. In fact, I was just saying to someone the other day that I'm on the road at least one night each week for the next 9 weeks in a row, starting this week.
Wow.
So traveling, yeah, it's a lot. But one benefit that does give me is I get to spend time with educators all across Canada and sometimes in the United States as well, and talk to them about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and offer my assistance, my advice, or just listen to what teachers are doing in their classrooms and spend time in classrooms. I'm spending a lot of time in actual classrooms these days, which has been a lot of fun. So doing a lot of traveling as well and seeing what's out there and what's going on in classrooms. So my days are pretty busy, equal parts, meetings and then conversations with educators, running, various aspects of Logix Academy with our teams is kind of what my regular day looks like, I guess.
Amazing. It sounds exciting, and even including the meetings. I always remember one of my directors at some point. He was always saying like, "Oh, now I'm a director. I don't work anymore. I'm all day in meetings. I don't get to do anything."
Right.
Saying like, "Well, yeah. I mean, yes and no. I kind of get it. You feel like you're not doing anything, but having those meetings and enabling people to do stuff as well is a big and significant chunk of work." And sometimes, I'm not going to say every single meeting for sure, but there are good meetings as well.
I generally hate meetings, but one of the nice things is that, my role is mainly in like scoping things and thinking of like the idea. So a lot of our, especially our learning experience design clients, for lack of better words, have a sense of the end goal, but they don't know how to get there. And so a lot of my job is coming up with the idea with our team on how they can get there. And so it gives us the chance to do a lot of big thinking, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of, what would you say, throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, sort of thing. So it's a lot of like, coming up with big ideas and then scoping it to meet what we're trying to achieve.
Amazing. So good stuff coming out of meetings as well. So Mike, you've had plenty of experience. You've advised people on how to do this, and you've been doing it for quite some time. But I'm sure that as any and every one of us, you've also had those moments where, you were going north, things went south. One of those fail moments or first attempts in learning. So if you have one of those favorite failures or something like that, we want to be there in that story. We want to live that moment with you. We want to take those lessons away home with us as well. Do you have such a story?
Sure. So when I started teaching, so this is 2013, 2012 was when I was doing some of my student teaching. I always knew I wanted to incorporate game design into my curriculum. And I got lucky pretty early on in my career that I got hired in Ontario. Just for context, in Ontario, Canada, it's very hard to get a public teaching job just kind of right out of the gate. Okay. So I applied to every job everywhere kind of aggressively and ended up actually getting hired at a private school. And they told me to basically write my own curriculum, which was obviously thrilling. But it was my first teaching job. And so I had equal parts of, excitement and big ideas and tons of goals and ambition, and also just not having any clue what I was doing kind of at all. Because while I came in as a mature, adult, like I started teaching when I was in my 30s, early 30s, I might be wrong on that, 29, 30, somewhere around there. I had a whole career prior to going back to school to become a teacher. I still was going into this brand new, completely green. And so I didn't do the game design challenge project, which is kind of like the culminating project for my whole curriculum culminated in this game design project for my grade 8 students. But I didn't do that right away. I kind of had to lay some of the groundwork, and I knew I wanted to incorporate elements of, coding and narrative design and audio design and graphic design, all of the things that I wanted to incorporate into this game design challenge. But I didn't know exactly how to do a lot of that yet when I was building this project. And, back in, let's say 2013, there wasn't as many resources as there are today for doing this stuff. It seems like, it might have been a lifetime ago, but it's 10 years ago, but so much has changed in 10 years. I designed a project for video creation, and I was a history major, so I wanted to incorporate or work with our classroom teachers. I was the computer science teacher. I wanted to work with our classroom teachers teaching social studies to do a sort of history video where students had to, create a video that talked about historical figure of some sort. And I would teach them things like video editing and content creation and, using tools like green screens and stuff like that, giving them a chance to use things like iMovie to do video editing. And the classroom teacher would teach the content in terms of, who the figure is that we're talking about or whatever. And I scoped out this project forgetting that I actually taught, so this was a grade 6 assignment, and I scoped it out forgetting that I taught almost 100 grade 6 students. And so when you ask 100 grade 6 students to create 3 to 5 minute videos, I think the biggest problem as a classroom teacher, and hopefully there's some classroom teachers listening that are knowing what I walked into, which is the fact that I had to actually watch 3 to 5 minute videos for 100 students. And it ended up dominating a month of my life, not just like the watching to grade them, but giving every student blocks of space and time to do things like green screen. We had one green screen and we had like 2 or 3 iPads. So giving all the kids the opportunity meant that I was staying in for lunches. I was coming in an hour and a half early every morning, and I was staying an hour and a half late so that students, if they wanted to come early, stay late, or stay over lunch or during recess, basically it was like a month and a half that was just completely dominated by recording video with students, coaching them on proper recording, and then coaching them on editing and using these tools, and then all of the grading that I had to do. And so the lesson that I learned, because basically this sucked the life right out of me. Like I was just exhausted after this project, was how important it is to, like, as excited as you are to do game-based learning or these big, hairy, like video projects or whatever, right sizing them for, the bandwidth that you have, especially as we're dealing with so many other like health issues and health concerns and keeping your class safe and healthy, and right sizing the project based on your bandwidth, based on your students' bandwidth, understanding that their entire days can't be dominated by one project, and that, when it's time to go home, they should really, just go home and enjoy their lives outside of school, but setting them up for success in a way that is right-sized for everybody was the lesson that I learned from this giant hairy video project that I wanted to do, that I regretted almost instantly and still think about all the time as I'm coaching educators on building projects and making sure that they're successful.
Well, it's a big and important lesson learned in that sense. Well done, explaining all the details of everything that was going on, because sometimes we say, oh yeah, it kind of takes a lot of time, but you might underestimate even after hearing the story. But, I think that the level of detail you gave us for sure is going to help us understand, how that actually worked for you. So Mike, let's flip it around. I love that story, but let's flip it around to something that actually went well. One of those proud moments, something that you would want to share here with the audience, with the engagers, about a time that things actually went well. And we want to know, of course, what do you think are some of these success factors?
So in a list of all of the things I've done in my career, the Game Design Challenge is one of the things I'm absolutely most proud of. It is, as you said in the intro, a year-long project. It is all my grade 8 students did. They started in September. They went till June, which is the school year in Ontario, Canada, and they made a game from nothing to an actual playable video game that was then shared with the rest of the school community at the end of the school year. And the challenge that I had was that I didn't have a curriculum. So I had to do a lot of work at deciding, what I wanted students to learn, what the outcomes should be, what could I teach them that would set them up for success in high school and potentially college, and getting to a point where they were learning something that was equal parts challenging, fun, and rewarding in the sense that, it's an accomplishment, something they can look back on and say, yo, I did that. I made a game. And that aligned to at least most of my students' interests. I mean, almost every student in every classroom, especially in elementary school, plays games in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just a mobile game or playing outside, in a field, sports, or whatever. Games are everywhere. Games are a part of our daily lives. And so aligning my students' interests and what they love with a pretty deep, detailed learning experience that wasn't surface, that had a lot of depth to it and asked a lot of them, but then gave them something that they could look back on and say, I made this thing and it's awesome. That was all the challenges. That was the problem that I was trying to solve with the game design challenge. And so the first year was interesting, and we had all of these assignments. There was various goals and checkpoints throughout the year, various assignments that they had to submit to show progress and what they were creating. So grading was being done. I was assessing along the way, both formative and summatively, at various large checkpoints like alpha tests and beta tests and narrative, finalizing narratives and stuff like that. But over the years, I guess the 5 years that I did it after I created it, it got better and better to the point where I had kids in grade 5 and 6 that were coming and talking to me about the game that they were going to make in grade 8 when they did the game design challenge, because they saw what the grade 8s were doing. They were like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm going to come to school and I'm going to make a video game. I had parents that came up to me and said, Mike, all my kid talks about is Scratch, the programming platform, the block-based programming platform that we primarily used at the time to create the games. And so as far as like a rewarding learning experience, both for me and the students, I think the game design challenge was a real success.
Well, it definitely sounds like it. And if nothing else, which I'm sure there's plenty more, but if nothing else, you enjoyed it a lot, and that shows. I mean, the students appreciate it. You appreciate it because you feel a lot better when you're doing it. I mean, there's no way of sort of going wrong with something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Great story, and it seems. Just one question: you did a game design was as a sort of from the side of what you were teaching and how that related to what you were doing. What was the subject?
So I was the computer science teacher,
Okay.
and because I got to design my curriculum myself, I kind of divided my curriculum into a couple different big buckets. So there was coding, there was video and audio creation.
Okay.
There was fundamentals, what I called fundamentals, or foundations is actually the word I use to describe it. Things like teaching, especially the younger kids, teaching them about how to use things like Google Docs, a little bit of keyboarding and stuff like that. But also in later years, I taught a lot of like digital citizenship, online safety, things like identifying fake news and fake information on the internet. And then culminated all of that, with this project that basically took, the graphic design, the video design, the coding, the research, and culminated it in grade 8 with this project. So every grade from grade 2, which is where we started, to grade 7, they did these units, the foundations unit, the graphic design unit, the video unit, and the coding unit. And all of those were scaffolded to get progressively more complex, more detailed. And then it was almost like the whole school experience had like a summative assessment, which was this grade 8 project. So taking everything that you would learn in the 5 years prior from grade 2 to 7 and apply all of that information that you've learned to this big project in grade 8.
Sounds amazing. I love it.
And it was a lot of fun.
It definitely sounds like it. Hopefully somebody took the torch away from you and they're still doing it. Is that the case?
So I don't think anyone's doing it at the school I was at, but I've shared, because I've presented on the project before at ISTE and at FETC. I actually did a session on the Game Design Challenge, and I've shared some of the resources in the past. I turned it into a little ebook. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but it would be fun to maybe revisit it and turn it into an actual book or an actual proper ebook. But I've definitely shared some of the resources, and I have a lot of that stuff saved on my personal drive because it is a great part of my teaching journey.
Amazing. Well, Mike, I'm guessing that from all of this experience and from the coaching that you do, you have some form of a method, process, series of steps, call it as you will. Can you share that with the audience? If you're going to start a project, tomorrow to help people using game design, using gamification, game-based learning, how would you approach it? How would you do it? What are the steps? What's the reasoning behind it for you?
At Logix, we have these conversations on a weekly basis with various organizations, people that are looking to do something. I think I'll center this on our Minecraft work because that's, I think, where this applies the best. First off, we ask a ton of questions related not just to Minecraft and what they know about Minecraft, but what they know they can do in Minecraft, what they think they can't do in Minecraft, just getting a sense of their knowledge level of the game that they want to use. Because most people come to us and say, we want to make a Minecraft thing. So that's kind of where it starts. So we ask a ton of questions, definitely asking a lot of questions about what the learning outcomes are. So what are you wanting to teach kids? So for example, with CBC, they said, we want to make a Minecraft thing and we want to do it on journalism and fake news and this idea of teaching students, fact versus fiction. And so that's great. And then diving a little bit deeper into that learning outcome, how do you want to get there? Do you want a narrative process, or how much building do you want people to do? So asking just a ton of questions. And to be fair, a lot of our clients don't have all of these answers. And so in a lot of cases, it's collaborative where we talk through it. Right? Where we sit and have like a working meeting where we pull out a Google Doc or a Word file or we've used like a Miro board, like a brainstorming kind of whiteboard solution. And we just brainstorm, ideas and ways to get there and see what, like I said earlier, I love the analogy, throwing spaghetti against the wall and kind of seeing what sticks. And so a lot of our process is collaborative. It's constructivist. We're really talking to each other and sharing ideas. And sometimes my role is educating our clients on what's possible in Minecraft, where I tend to also start with yes. People say, well, what can you do? And I said, well, you can do almost anything in Minecraft. And then starting to scope it accurately based on, I don't want to limit people to what they think they can and can't do. I want them to throw the ideas out and then we'll see what we can do with those ideas. But when you kind of put arbitrary limits on people in a brainstorming process, you tend to get not as good a result. So trying to give people a lot of yeses. And then when you come to a no, trying to find a creative solution to turn the no to a yes. And it might be not exactly the way that they were thinking, but it ends up working out in the end, usually. So I really enjoy that process of building and working on a Minecraft project with folks. Is just sitting in a call. These are the meetings that are really fun, right, Rob? where you do sit on a call for an hour and you just talk about what's possible and talk big ideas and you do a lot of big brain thinking and see what you come out with after that. And then I usually take all of that back to our team. We have a couple of different folks that I will go to kind of first and say, what do you think of this? And what do you think of this? And what do you think of this? And because they have a lot of experience with Minecraft as well, they'll come up with some ideas. And we have a lot of classroom experience at Logix as well. So knowing what works in a classroom and what doesn't work in a classroom, and then we put together a scope of work and we go from there. But asking a lot of questions and trying to create as a collaborative brainstorming kind of ideation environment as possible is a really fun part of my job and what we do at Logix. Yeah.
Sounds amazing and very aligned to what we were hearing from you at the start of the interview.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification.
And Mike, what would you say after hearing these questions? You now know at least a little bit more about the vibe of the podcast. Would you say that there's someone that you would like to listen to answering these questions? Somebody that makes you curious and you would say, well, this could be a featured guest I would be interested in hearing on Professor Game.
I kind of knew this question was coming, and I actually scrolled. First off, you have well over 200 episodes of this podcast, which is absolutely, as a podcaster, I know how much of a grind it is. I know how hard it is to do a podcast for any length of time. So kudos for you, getting, well over 200 episodes in. That's incredible. And I was thrilled to see, so many of my friends. I listened to your conversation with John Spike, who is a very good friend of mine, and I absolutely loved it. And I saw a lot of folks. So I was challenged to think of an answer to this question. And so I actually, shockingly though, have three, and one's a bit of or two are a bit of a cop out. So I'm actually going to reiterate the importance of talking to Kurt, Squire, and Constance that John mentioned. They're geniuses, like flat out two of the smartest people in game-based learning and gamification and video games and education that exist. And I actually, I echo John's sentiment about Kurt specifically. If you listen to On Education at all, or actually if you go to my website and look at my blog, I actually have a blog post that is basically a love letter to Kurt Squire. Because I don't think I would be teaching and in education if it wasn't for Kurt and what he did to validate someone like me's opinion of video games and what they can do to be effective teaching tools. So he wrote his dissertation. I think John mentioned this, but if you don't listen to John's podcast, Kurt Squire, professor at UC Irvine, and wrote his PhD dissertation on the use of Civilization 3, Sid Meier's Civilization 3, as a tool to teach history. And as a history major, a giant history nerd, and a rabid Civilization player, this hit on like every sweet spot that you could possibly imagine for me. And so I read it, and it was like the cloud, the clouds parting and the sky clearing. And it was like, yeah, this could happen. You can do this at school and not get laughed at. And I have the receipts to show for it now with Kurt's dissertation. So, we've actually never met, though we've come very close to meeting multiple times, but we do talk occasionally in DMs on Twitter and stuff like that. And he definitely knows that I wrote him basically a fanboy blog post. And so my love for Kurt Squire knows no bounds and is very apparent. And so Kurt and Constance, they are the power couple of game-based learning. And so I'll mention them. And I also want to give a shout out to, almost in the same vein, here's someone that I don't think you have spoken to, Bob Whitaker, who is a professor of history at, I'm going to say it's Collin College. It might not be Colin, it might be Colin, not 100% sure, but it's in Austin, Texas. And he actually hosts a podcast called History Respawned. That is a podcast that merges video games and factual history and talking about the kind of the interconnection between the two and how you can learn history from specific video games. So tons of awesome podcast episodes there on History Respawned, obviously talking a lot about games like Civilization, Assassin's Creed, Oregon Trail, basically anything that has even a hint of kind of some historicity, you will see on the History Respawn podcast. And he would be a fabulous person to talk to. So Bob Whitaker would be another strong recommendation to have on this podcast.
I was made a quick look to find him on the internet and found his History Respawned web. It sounds pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's a pretty good podcast. I don't listen to every episode, but I definitely listen to almost all of the Civilization episodes because he talks about Civilization a lot. Also, Assassin's Creed makes pretty heavy appearances on the podcast. But even games like Wolfenstein, which is, it's got some roots in history. There's tons of history in video games, and there's tons of opportunity to talk about it, and he covers it very, very well.
Absolutely. It looks pretty cool. So we'll reach out to Bob and see if he's interested in participating in the podcast as well. And talking about recommendations, Mike, is there any book that you would recommend an audience like this with the Engagers?
So another person that I've fanboyed over more than once is Dr. Jane McGonigal, who I'm sure has come up on your podcast before, because another thing that has basically changed my life is her idea that games aren't something we should be doing less of, but we should be doing more of. And her book, Reality is Broken: Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World, was, pardon the pun, but a game changer for me. And her TED Talk on the same subject is absolutely phenomenal. I've read that book multiple times, probably at least 2 or 3 times. And it was one of those books, along with Kurt's dissertation, it was one of those pieces of work that I read very early on in my teaching career that really helped me justify that I wasn't crazy, because, when you're in teachers college and it was like 2012, 2009, 2010, and you're saying, let's use games to teach kids. And you have these like 50, 60-year-old retired teachers that look at you sideways because, they think you're crazy. And you say, no. I absolutely think you can use games for teaching. And they think you're insane. But I started to look for resources that justified, my opinion, because I was just this guy that wanted to, use video games to teach, at least to them anyways. And so Jane McGonigal's book, Reality is Broken, was amazing for me, and such a great resource to use to, feel like I kind of knew what I was talking about a little. Amazing book. She has definitely come up a few times. Yeah, I have no doubt.
Yes, as a book to read. She has amazing work out there, for sure. And talking about, those things that other people do very, very well. In your case, what would you say is your superpower, that thing that you do at least better than most other people?
This is going to sound weird, but I actually play a lot of video games. And so I think a lot of learning experience designers in particular don't think of gamification as this like fun, playful learning fun. They think of it as just another thing to try to like loop people into a feedback loop that creates more content, that creates more engagement, that keeps people on platforms longer, that keeps people doing whatever it is that you want them to do. Keep them doing it longer by trying to do some sort of game loop. And I think that that's a terrible approach. It's a dangerous approach in some cases. I mean, we've seen the danger of some of those gamified feedback loops when it comes to addiction and stuff like that, which I absolutely think is a real thing. And so I think the thing that we do really well is that I'm a gamer. I play a lot of games. I understand games. I understand what makes games fun and appealing to people. I understand the joy that comes from victory and success in a game, and then trying to never lose sight of what the single most important thing about any gamified, game-based learning, playful experience is fun. Undoubtedly, it has to be fun. If it's not fun, you lose people. And so knowing what's fun, knowing what I find fun and what my kids, I have 2 kids, and, one is 14 and one is 7. So I actually have a pretty wide, breadth of, my oldest is in grade 9 and my youngest is in grade 1. And so I have a really good sense of what kids find fun right now. And as someone that is an avid gamer, I have a sense of what's fun. And so trying to always find the fun, trying to find the narrative experience that captures kids' imaginations, and their passions and gets them not just to like stay in the experience longer, because if that's your goal, I think that's a terrible outcome to try to achieve, unless you're a multinational social media platform that is just trying to get people obsessed with, their red numbers over top of their icons. But, my goal is to try to have kids learn something. And so I want them to really enjoy the experience and come away with some new knowledge.
Amazing. Sounds like a very important superpower to have in this world, for sure.
I play a lot of games. That's my superpower. I'll take it.
I'll take it any day of the week, for sure. And we come to a difficult question now, Mike, because, it seems you said it. You play a lot of games. So what would you say is your favorite game?
Well, this is a trap. I mean, my all-time, you've heard me mention it a couple of times, my all-time favorite game is Civilization in all of its forms. I started playing Civilization in I don't know how old I was, but Civilization 2, Civilization 1 even, I guess, was my first Civilization game. So I've been playing them since the start. I have over 1,600 hours in Civilization 5 in particular. So in love with Civilization. I know there's a new one coming, and I'm pretty excited about that. I'm obsessed with simulation games, management games, any type of resource management type game. Those are kind of like the games I gravitate to the most. So I'm playing a lot of Satisfactory right now, which is it sounds really boring. It's where you build production lines for different products and you have to create like efficient factories, but it's all in like this really gorgeous 3D world. And it is an absolutely phenomenal game. Yeah. And so Satisfactory is probably my second favorite game. I also really enjoy survival, especially survival games that have building elements. So I don't love the PvP type survival games like World War Z or whatever, but I love the survival building games like Valheim or V Rising. And there's a lot of really cool No Man's Sky, which is like space survival game, which, combines a couple of my favorite things. And then there's a lot of really cool survival games coming. Like there's a new Lord of the Rings survival game coming up that is really exciting. And I believe Blizzard is making a survival MMO, which is another one of my favorite things. I used to be a very avid World of Warcraft player. So but I do, like I said, I play a lot of games. I have well over 600 games in my Steam account, and so I do like a lot of different things, but definitely Civ and Satisfactory and management games are my favorites.
Cool. I hadn't heard of that Satisfactory. I was looking it up. I'm not sure if I arrived to the right one, because I'm teaching operations as well. So it could definitely hit a right spot in that sense, for sure. Sure. So Mike, thank you very much for sharing everything that you've shared, your experience, your knowledge. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we leave. And of course, let us know where we can find out more about you and your work.
Well, thanks, Rob. It's been great to be with you. You can connect with me in a couple different ways. The easiest way still, I guess, is Twitter, at Mr. Washburn, Mister Washburn on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Washburn on almost everything. On TikTok, I'm also at Mr. Washburn, but on there, actually, it is games, but I do a lot of Warhammer content these days. So I'm doing a lot of painting of tabletop figures and a lot of Warhammer stuff. So if you're into Warhammer and into Warhammer painting, then go check me out on TikTok and YouTube, because that's where I do a lot of Warhammer stuff and content creation for Warhammer. And then MikeWashburn.net is my kind of educator website, and MrWashburn.com is kind of my content creation website. So I have a couple different places. And then, if you just Google Mr. Washburn, I'm kind of everywhere. I have a Twitch account. I'm a very poor streamer in terms of my frequency of streaming. I would love to stream more often. So kind of everywhere, Mr. Washburn is where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you very much once again, Mike Washburn, Mr. Washburn, however we should be calling you nowadays. However, Engagers, Mike, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over.
Engagers, it is fantastic to have you here, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Professor Game Podcast. And if you want more interviews with amazing with incredible guests like Mike. Please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started on our email list for free. That way you can be in contact. You'll have my email. We'll have your email. We'll be able to send any opportunities that we find going your way. And all of this is absolutely for free. And remember also, before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow, whatever that looks like on your favorite podcast app. This is also for free. And listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.